Gallup says 1 in 2 people have left their job because of a bad leader. If 2 of your best people left this quarter, would you know if it was your middle management? And what is it costing you compared to training them?
Welcome to the Key Hire Small Business Podcast, hosted by Corey Harlock, creator of Key Hire Solutions, where small business owners learn how to build stronger teams, simplify growth, and scale confidently. Got feedback or topic ideas? Send us a text. If you're listening on a handheld device, tap the link in the show notes to message the show. Subscribe or follow on your favorite platform, and follow Key Hire Solutions on social media for more insights and updates between episodes. To learn more about how Key Hire can help scale your business, visit keyhire.solutions. Connect with Corey on LinkedIn through the link in the show notes. Mention you're a listener, and he'll accept your request. And now, on with the show. Here's your host, Corey Harlock.
Okay, a little housekeeping before we get started with Emma Rose today. I know I teased a segment called the One Thing last episode, and unfortunately, Jana from First Saturday Line wasn't able to be with us to record that episode. So we're going to punt it. We don't know if we'll get Jana, but we are going to. That is a segment we really want to launch. So hopefully in the coming weeks, we can get that episode or that segment started with y'all. Hang in there with us. And then you know how I like to talk about comments. We had an episode with Ryan Hogan. I think it was 3 or 4 episodes back. And he was talking about how he views bringing a new hire into his organization as a foreign body into your immune system, and how does your immune system react? As he said, it's not going to be perfect, but you want that momentum and you want it to go in the right way. An 80%er, you want to make sure you suss any of those bad things out. You don't want them to react with your current employees. Well, Nasir Y commented and said exactly, it's about direction, not perfection, which is exactly what Ryan was talking about. Thank you, Nasir. We appreciate the comments, guys. Keep them coming. All right, our show today. We are talking with Emma Rose Connolly. She's a consultant, facilitator, and coach at Conversant. They have a unique approach to improving performance and results through conversation and human connection. Whether your challenge is performance, strategy, alignment, culture, leadership, collaboration, or beyond, the conversations are the work, and there's a design to conversations that produce meaningful and enduring results. Matt, let's bring on Emma Rose. Welcome.
Hello. Good to see you. I'm doing very well. How are you?
It's great to see you again.
Yes.
For those of you who are listening, Conversant also has a podcast, and I was lucky enough to be a guest with them. So Emma Rose is returning the favor with us here today.
Happy to do it. Happy to be here.
Cool. And, the reason this show came about is you guys have this amazing emerging leaders program, which is really kind of centered at middle management. And in my getting to know you and working with Conversant and getting to know some of your consultants and leadership over there, you guys really have a great consultancy. But this focus on middle management, and a lot of the clients I work with, they struggle with middle management. And I think the lead-in said it all. You can lose good people because of those middle managers, and the cost is meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what is your experience, or what drove Conversant around to create a program to really focus on that segment or that piece of the leadership team?
Yeah, well, I think that, that one stat is such a great one, and there's so many that direct a lot of attention at that population. But historically, we've done a lot more work with senior leadership, or we've done change initiatives within an organization. So we are doing work on culture or strategy execution, and that's where we would touch some of the middle management band. But otherwise, it's really not a very strong case for investment for most leaders. And there's many, many reasons for that, and we might be able to get into that. But we've just noticed that when we're working at a senior leadership level, often at the executive level or the band just below, and we're talking about succession and we're talking about their leadership development edges, a lot of them are fighting against these deeply ingrained habits that they've just functioned within for decades within their career. And a lot of them, once they get that kind of training later, say, oh, I wish I'd had this opportunity. When I was younger, I would have avoided so many different mistakes. And we've heard that so many times that we felt like, why are we not able to create an opportunity for people that are earlier in their career or emerging in their leadership, for them to be able to develop some of these really critical skill sets that are only becoming more and more important as the world keeps evolving? And a lot of them do have to do with how you engage with people, how you make sure you have the skills to have really effective conversations, how you're creating the conditions for people to feel psychologically safe and engaged and valued. And middle managers have such a huge role to play in all of that. Another Gallup statistic actually is that middle managers contribute to 70% of employee engagement variance, which is a pretty high number. So if you were to look at just that population and say, hey, that's worth us taking a look at, we think that that's really high leverage and could produce really meaningful and outsized results into the future. And not just long-term results, that you could probably start seeing those impacts really quickly. So anyway, we think it's really interesting to be able to work with them. And I love working with people that are motivated to keep developing and they want to grow, but they just haven't been able to find the opportunity for themselves. So we wanted to start the Emerging Leader Program so that we could hit some of that population and put it at a price point that whether or not they're sponsored by their organization, they could enroll themselves in that opportunity and get some of these skills rolling.
Yeah, and I think it's such a meaningful program. A lot of times we'll take our best doer, person that aren't in a leadership role, and they show up on time and they're reliable and they're conscientious and they take a little bit of initiative. And we say, well, they'd make a great supervisor or a great manager. And we thrust them into that role, give them very little support. And now your best doer isn't being successful as a manager. And next thing you know, they're out the door. And we've missed, it's expensive. We lost a really good, productive person who is thriving in our company. We put them in a situation where we expected them to succeed and we didn't support them. And either they get disillusioned or we get disillusioned, but either way, they leave the company. And now we're down two good people. Essentially, we're down the role they used to do. And now we have a gap in our leadership as well. Is that kind of what we're trying to address here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you get people that are really great individual contributors. They're super effective technically, or they're really great at being able to reliably produce a specific result on their own. And then you put them in a people management role. And I don't know where it started that we assumed that people management was this sort of like side gig that nobody needed to get trained around. Because it's
my side hustle is people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which people are incredibly complex. And then you're managing multiple people in a team within a really complex organizational environment. And middle managers are often the translators of strategy. They're the ones that are trying to deal with changing employee expectations. They've never had performance conversations. So you think about the impact of that is really huge. And people, I think, end up feeling just really disempowered in those positions because maybe they're thinking, I guess people management wasn't for me, or, I suck at my job, when if only they had been set up for success. So I think a lot of those people end up, quote unquote, failing just because there wasn't the support behind them to be able to evolve their own skill set in that direction. I think we end up missing out on really great, effective leaders that could have an influence on other up and coming talent all over the place. We're doing that. And in terms of the loss, I think it's about 200% of a middle manager's salary. That's the cost of them leaving.
Yep.
And then it takes 8 to 12 months for a successor to get up to the same level of productivity.
And it depends who's doing the hiring. If it's a DIY hire, the hiring percentage is 25 to 33%. They get it right. So you have to hire, you'll end up hiring 3 to 4 times for that role before you get someone in that role you're satisfied with, and they might not even have the background or they don't have that internal knowledge of the company that person who left did.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's where that 200% creeps up, because every time you hire, it costs more, all the opportunity costs, maybe some more people quit on the line because now we're missing a layer of management and it gets a little chaotic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's crazy. And, there's a lot more than just even productivity that a middle manager contributes, because your relationship with your manager, like you said with that stat of that people leave the leader, they're creating an environment that people work within. And people spend so much of their life working that if the environment feels like it's not conducive to people's well-being or to their own success in their careers, then it's really hard to drive engagement there. And it's creating waste that ripples then throughout the system, because you're then infecting, I'm going to use that word, infecting the culture. And it ends up bleeding through and having effects that last way after that person leaves. So yeah, it's definitely worth taking a look at.
And as you're talking, I don't have stats around this, but I believe it to be true. Being promoted from within is what most companies aspire to do. But for the person being promoted, it's harder for them because they were here, they were at a level, and now they've all of a sudden been put in a level of responsibility and leadership. And some people will support that. Some people are going to be pissed off about it. And they're going to clap back and try to make their life a little difficult. So we give them that, and then we give them no skill or no training how to deal with that. But even beyond that, the higher you go in a company, it's harder for the individual, because there will be people in that company that will always see you as the person in the role where you started. And I don't know if there's statistics around that, but sometimes coming in from the outside is an easier transition than being moved internally up into a role, especially if you move a few kind of in quick succession.
Right. I don't have statistics around that either. It's an interesting question. I would argue that that's true. And you probably know more about this than I do, but I've also seen a lot of organizations have an external hire come in, and it's almost like tissue rejection, because there's just not the cultural.
I love how we're
resonance.
keeping Ryan Hogan's foreign body theme going. There you go. Ryan. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So there is something to be said for people having. Go ahead.
Cut you off. I told you I'm an interrupter. But
that's okay.
When you bring in the wrong leader and you don't have the right hiring process, and you bring someone in to fill a spot that doesn't have the experience or the credibility, you're right. People will reject it and think, well, I could have done a better job than this person. Why didn't they just promote me? And now you create that chaos within the ranks.
Right. Well, and you just used the word that was the direction I was going to go, is it's all about credibility and how people develop that within the system. And credibility can come from many different sources. I think most of us assume that it just comes from your credentials or experience, but that gets you maybe this far in a conversation, like a couple minutes into a relationship with somebody. It gets you in the door, but it doesn't get you much further than that. So you have to be able to demonstrate that you're really living as an example of somebody that's credible in the role, in the context, and in the relationships that really matter to their success. And so a lot of that has to do with how you engage with other people, how well you're able to connect with their interests, how well you're able to learn from all the people around you and represent the whole organization. Engage with conflict, demonstrate self-awareness, all of these different things that are also skills. And so I think sometimes the biggest leap for people that are being elevated to that middle management position from being an individual contributor is that that's a big psychological shift in terms of your relationship with the rest of the organization. And I think that's where people struggle a lot, that then translates into a loss of credibility, because they're not owning their new authority, and they're not doing it in a way that's connected versus superior. So at Conversant, we distinguish between connected leadership and superior leadership, where superior leadership, you're relying on things like your credentials or your title or an assumption that everybody's just going to do what you say because you're the most powerful person or the smartest one in the room. Where connected leadership is really about, am I really effective at connecting all the different contributions and talents within my team or across the organization? And that's relational dynamics. So that does take skill, and it does mean you're not relying on your own brilliance. And so, there's something to be said for how well you're able to develop those relationships and create cohesion and community and a system of contribution across the team.
Right.
And that means people really owning their influence. And sometimes people get elevated to that, promoted role, and they're sort of apologetic about it, or they don't know how to relate to their once peers, or they're not supported by their manager in navigating that transition. So there's a lot that can go wrong. I think it's actually probably the unique case that people feel fully supported in that transition,
right,
and make that switch psychologically about their own identity within the organization.
It's and not to whitewash your leadership analogy, but it's almost a difference between managing and leading, right? The tell people what to do and kind of work with people to get buy-in and have a team working together towards a common goal.
Right. Yeah. Well, when we talk about the difference between supervision management and leadership, and so supervision really being that you have to be around to monitor that other person's productivity and make sure that they're doing the right things, and you're available for a lot of questions, and there's a lot of oversight, right? Then management, you want to start backing off some of that oversight and be coordinating the contribution of multiple people on a team. So you're trying to build the effectiveness of all these different people around a specific charge or goal of that team, which does take a different skill set than supervision. And the degree of trust that there has to be in those relationships increases as well. And then you get to leadership, and really you should be spending more of your time thinking on behalf of the bigger organization and making connections across the organization with other teams and thinking more strategically. And that takes bandwidth that if you're really stuck at this management and supervision level, it's really hard to reach that far. I recently had somebody on our podcast, and she said that early in her career, somebody had defined leadership as crossing the threshold. And I love that. Like, where are you leading? Where are you going to be the first person to cross a threshold? And that's not necessarily the charge of a manager, but sometimes it is. I think there's always a percentage of your time you're trying to spend on different things, but you want to be able to navigate that evolution over the course of your career if you're ultimately wanting to be in more of a strategic leadership position.
I love the distinction between supervision, management, and leadership. And it sounds like the Emerging Leader program, is it focused on supervision and management, or?
It's mostly, yes. So there's pieces of supervision in there, but mostly we're trying to talk about management. Okay. And even that bridge to leadership a little bit too. But the core content that we cover, because it's often the contextual challenges that managers are up against, are how to generate alignment. So that's whether it's with your team or with other leaders on other teams that you're having to coordinate with. How to delegate, which is a huge barrier to people being able to bridge into more of that leadership work or be strategic in how they're managing other people. And then feedback. So am I able to give and receive feedback and have performance conversations that really drive some sort of difference in behavior or move us in the direction that we want to go? Right. So those we categorize as different kinds of conversations that you need to be equipped to go and have. So can you go have an alignment conversation and be the source of there being really valuable movement in an aligned direction? Can you have really high quality delegation conversations where people are clear on what they need to go do and they're committed to it in a way that you're not only able to trust them, but it's generating more trust in their capability and competence over time? And then feedback when they miss the mark or when they're doing really well, are you making sure that you're accountable for going and having those conversations so that you're reinforcing the behavior you do want to see? Right. And via those conversations, also building a really high degree of trust. I think the avoidance of those conversations is actually what erodes it quite a bit. So are people being proactive about making sure they're having those conversations in the right timing? So those conversations apply at every rung of leadership once you start being a people manager. And it can even be true if you're an individual contributor that's needing to collaborate well with other people. So they translate across the different spheres, but we're really focused on building the competence in the supervision and then management space specifically.
That's super interesting. The conversations piece.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, small business owners struggle with the conversation and the communication piece.
Mm-hmm. It's not just small business owners, just so you know.
Fair enough. And it's in this context, a small business owner, I've said this a million times, they didn't start a business because they like to hire and lead people. They had a passion and something they wanted to do. And the building of a team, and the more successful you get, the bigger that team gets, and the bigger the need for the communication and the proper leadership and having all of these core fundamentals in place so you can effectively communicate. Mm-hmm. And that's where oftentimes they hit that kind of plateau in leadership, because to me, that would be a capacity issue where right. We don't know what to do now. All we can do is work harder and work longer. That is our only input into being more successful. Where what you're talking about is having the ability to have these conversations and build a team and rally a team and get everyone pointed in the same direction is at all levels of leadership. Mm-hmm. Is really, really important. And so often I think we might be transitioning into mistakes now. Mm-hmm. Leadership teams that are not aligned.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes back, it's always going to be challenging, right? I have somebody in my life who told me at one point, challenging conversations are always going to be challenging. By definition, even if you get great at having them, they're still going to be challenging.
They still suck. Yeah, you don't look forward to them.
Right. You don't look forward to it, but you just get more capable of confronting the challenge rather than avoiding it. Most of our culture teaches us to avoid the challenge. So a lot of us are not taught to turn towards it and trust ourselves to deal with it. Right. But you go back even to school and doing your first group project and how frustrating that was to trust that people were going to do the thing that they were accountable for doing, or coordinating who's responsible for what. And so much of collaboration in the organizational environment still feels like that to people. And for managers, it's really easy also to make assumptions about people's competence or their capacity. So my team, a lot of really empathetic, caring leaders get into this mindset of, my team's already really overwhelmed. They're already really busy. They don't have the time. I'm just going to do it. But that's because I'm just going to do it is the easiest thing for them. It's the path of least resistance.
It's not the right thing. It's the easy thing.
Right. And underneath that, you might get to, I actually don't trust them to do it the same way that I would, or I don't trust them to get it done in the amount of time and at the highest quality. Right. And so whether it's a caring leader or it's somebody who isn't used to leading people and is kind of wondering if they really like people at all, and they just want to avoid and get things done so that they're still meeting expectations, but they're not having to deal with the challenge of coordination.
Right.
But if you scale that means we're severely underutilizing our talent. So we talk about we're smarter together than we ever are apart. That's true really throughout an organization. And so how are you making sure you're connecting all those dots? That takes being able to have difficult conversations. And then we also talk about well-timed conversations. So even if they're not super challenging, I'll tell you about one framework that's pretty impactful for people. And we do introduce it within the Emerging Leader Program. But if you look at productivity or progress on a given initiative is a one-to-one line with time. So we're improving over time. Mm-hmm. We assume that's a straight line, right? And then, of course, because life deters from our intentions naturally, we fall off course in whatever way that is. So it might be results are worse than they expected to be. It could be there's a relationship that's getting off track. Like, I'm starting to notice that person's not behaving in the way that I assumed they were going to, or they're not meeting targets, or I'm just feeling a little off about what they're capable of being able to deliver. That's the opportunity to have a conversation, and we call it point easy. It doesn't mean it's actually an easy conversation to have, but it means it's way easier than if you kick that under the rug
Kick the can. Yeah. Until it becomes a big problem.
Yep. And so then performance keeps deterring, and then you get to point difficult. And then it keeps deterring if you keep avoiding it, and it gets to point crisis, which we sometimes affectionately call point HR, because that's sometimes where we get is that we feel like, oh, now this has gotten to a point that I don't even know how to address it. And
point critical is damage, could be damaged relationship, could be beyond repair, or could need a big intervention. Now it's 10x the work and resources to try to get it back to some close to where it used to be, where point easy is, hey, is everything okay? I've noticed what's going on here. Am I on the right track?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's right. And then to make it also really practical, the farther you let that deter from our intended performance line, the more resources and energy it's going to take to correct that. So you've already created the distrust and probably some disengagement somewhere along the way there. Yep. And now you have to correct for it. So you're already off track. So you think about just the loss, both materially and relationally, is pretty intense. And so just having this training around, oh, I should trust my instinct when I feel like something's off, and go have the easier conversation now and see if that builds our relationship. But people often think, oh, well, that's not my problem, or it'll just go away. And the assumption is, maybe it's not going to go away, and maybe we should just go talk to them.
Yeah.
But it's not our natural instinct, because we're so prepared to protect ourselves or avoid difficulty. And so a lot of our work, and it's introduced in great detail in the Emerging Leader program, is really just about, can I develop self-awareness such that I'm able to make different decisions? So can I catch where I am avoiding something? Or can I catch where I am seeing something other people aren't seeing, and trust that that's actually a moment to go have a conversation? But it's not what we're classically trained to do through school or business school or anything like that. So
and I love the terminology, because it makes sense. Point easy, point critical, point hard, or what it was. Yeah. And it's funny having all these conversations. I think 2 or 3 episodes we had Ryan Estes on, and we were talking about authentic leadership. And one of his key points was go for coffee. Not physically go for, but take 15 minutes and talk to your team and just check in. And this keys in, because that at that point easy, you notice someone's off. We deal with people. People are complex, and shit happens, and it's not always you. It's not always me. It could be life happening in the background. It could have nothing to do with work.
Right.
And I've gotten the calls before from a client saying, so-and-so, it's been 2 weeks now. They're not getting it done. I'm going to call them in my office, and here's what I'm going to say. And I always say, well, can I give you, would it be a bad idea if I gave you some advice? Or like, well, what would you do? And I would say, I would lead with, is everything okay? I've noticed you haven't been performing. They might be going through something at home. It might not have anything to do with your company. And I know it's hard for you to not take it personally, because it's affecting your business, and you carry the weight of having to make sure people get paychecks so they can get food on the table and pay them. I get it. But we're dealing with people, and sometimes the right question is just, as Ryan Estes says, take them for coffee and say, everything okay? I've noticed you've been a little off, just like you said, right? And it's funny when these things all align, and they might say, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just, I found out my spouse got diagnosed with cancer. Oh my God, how can I help? Now it's empathy, not anger. And in absence of information, the human mind is wonderful. It will fill in the blanks, and it never fills it in with good stuff.
Yep.
It always fills your mind with negative stuff. So you're building up a story. And the longer you let that run, that molehill's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it probably has nothing to do with what's in your brain, with what's going on that side. But by the time, if you let it build, you might not be able to repair that relationship, right? It's hard to go from that to being empathetic, or, oh man, I didn't realize. So getting in early is a common theme of people we've had here talking about leadership. It's like just checking in on your people. And if you do that regularly, You might avoid a lot of this because the can will never be kicked.
Right.
You're just like, hey, how are things? I've noticed last week you've been a little off. Yeah. Don't worry, I'll be fine next week. Just working through stuff. Or they might say, yeah, I'm upset. You gave that project to so and so, and I thought I should have had it. I had no idea. Let's talk through that. How can we make it right? We got another project coming up. Or, yeah, your performance isn't there. I need to see this out of you if you want to get on a project like that. But it just opens the door to like a difficult conversation.
Right.
But it's going to be way less difficult at that entry point, at point easy.
Right. Well, and, it's assuming that even if, that conversation, let's say it's a performance conversation, and you're noticing something that's out of line with expectations, or somebody's chronically not delivering on what they're accountable to. Well, having that conversation earlier, it still might be a hard conversation, and having it early doesn't guarantee that they're going to respond really well and be super open to the conversation. But it does mean that you're at least being responsible for generating clarity as soon as you possibly can. Clarity for them, clarity for yourself, clarity for the organization, which is far less painful than avoid, and everything gets distorted. And then people months down the line go, but you never told me I was doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
So we're not giving people an opportunity to actually show up. And I think all of us could probably tell a story about some time in our career when we weren't up to the standard that we would like to be, but it took something happening for us to wake up to that fact, whether it was a conversation with somebody or some consequence of whatever we were doing. And we'd like to be able to have that opportunity happen sooner for people so that they can step into it rather than feeling like everything just crumbled on top of them because they weren't in conversation with one another. So it doesn't mean it's easy. It does mean really having a strong sense of self-awareness and emotional agility, I think, is increasingly important also in work today. It's always been important, but people are working long hours, high stress. The middle management band in particular, they are operating under more and more constraint in terms of budgets. So they're leading bigger teams with no training. 44% of managers globally have never had training around leadership development. So they don't have the skill set.
44% of managers.
44% of managers. That's another Gallup statistic.
I've never had Gallup's getting a lot of press here today.
I know. They're really reliable.
That's 44% of managers have never had training.
Yeah.
Crazy town.
Yeah. So, it's pretty important for us to consider that there's a lot of stress on that population because they haven't been set up for success in terms of support or skill development. We throw them into it. It's not only a role shift or a title change. It's also an identity shift because they're having to figure out how they relate to everybody in a different way.
Yeah, they're going from a doer to a leader or a supervisor of people.
Yep. And so then you're now having to switch your brain power to be responsible for a whole different set of things versus what you were before. You're now responsible for other people's performance.
You're responsible for everything instead of your little area of the business.
Right. Exactly. And so you have that plus now a lot of budget cuts mean that middle managers have bigger teams and more responsibility. So you have a pretty significant number of people that you're responsible for. You're responsible for even more results, and you're supposed to deliver on a shorter timeline. So that all, plus the state of the world, compounds. People have lives, like you're saying, outside of work. Stress management is huge. I mean, if there was a hotter topic out there, come and give it to me, because I think that's actually one of them. I mean, it's also high leverage in people's lives. Like if I could learn how to navigate my day in a way that lowers my stress level, people would feel so much better about their lives and their relationship to work. And your mood infects everybody else too. So we say that people catch a mood faster than 100%. They catch a cold.
Well, if your leader comes in pissed off, everyone's like, uh-oh, watch out for Corey. He's on the rampage today, and everyone's walking on eggshells.
Right. Yeah.
And another interesting thing you said about that middle management working with bigger teams, the entry level and the skilled people are so hard to find.
Right.
you want every reason for them to want to stay at your company, and putting a new manager in place and not giving them the ability to, or the skills, not the ability, the skills they need to be effective at their role, that trickles down. And when someone knocks on the door of your best fill in the blank technician or CNC operator or welder, whatever it might be, shipping, receiving, and says, hey, we have an opening, I'll give you $2 more an hour. And they say, yeah, I'm not enjoying this here right now. I'm willing to talk. That's important. And it's meaningful because they really, the middle management, I don't know if you have stats around this, but they interact with the line people, the hourlies, on a much higher rate than the manager above, the director or whatever it is. They're really that conduit between. And if they're not having any fun and they don't want to come to work and they're stressed out, they're not going to treat those people well. So when they get a call about a new opportunity, they're going to be more open to that new opportunity. Even if they've been there, they're a legacy employee. And I've been here 10 years, but this last 6 months has been no fun. And I've been thinking about leaving. Oh, yeah, you got a job and you're gonna pay me how much? I'm listening, where 6 months ago I would have just said, no, I'm good.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's part of what contributes to that 70% of variance in employee engagement, right? Is just a manager's mood or how their relationship to work is at that given time. And more managers are also actively disengaged at work. So looking for other work, not feeling at all psychologically or emotionally connected to their work. And that ends up affecting everybody around them. And then not Gallup this time. This is actually McKinsey research. But so McKinsey in the last couple of years did some research that showed that direct recognition from your direct manager is actually the most significant impact on engagement. So even more so than compensation. Now, that's a catch. Like if there's higher compensation offered elsewhere, grass is greener effect. If you're having a shit time in your current job, and then somebody's saying, hey, we'll value you over here and we'll put it at this dollar amount, that's a tough
for sure. But if you're with a company and they've treated you well,
yeah,
and you're happy, you will 9 times out, more often than not, say to those people, I'm good. I like where I am. I'm not really looking right now. And that's so important. And I'm going to go way back when you're talking about those point easy conversations, and sometimes the person is underperforming. There are cases where you have a high performer who's had 0 feedback over a year. Right. They go in for their performance and they resign. And the person giving the performance review says, well, you can't resign. You're my best employee. I was just going to give you a huge raise. And they say, I thought I've been doing a horrible job. No one's given me any feedback all year, and I didn't get put on a project over here, or I got overlooked for this. So I went and found another job because I don't feel appreciated. Right. And point easy is, hey, you're doing a great job. I did a podcast, I think it was back in 2025, Matt might prove me wrong, but about you need to rehire your best employees. And what I mean by that is, in this tough time, just go sit them down and say, how are things going? Are you getting calls from other people? I know you're getting calls from other people. And I appreciate the fact that so far you keep saying you're not interested. What do you need from me to keep saying I'm not interested? Right. And you'll be shocked. Most of the requests won't be more money. Right. Very few people are going to say, I need 20 grand more. I bet you most people will say, I would love to have a bit of a flexible schedule. If I could work every Friday or every other Friday at home so I could spend more time with my family. If I could get an extra week of holidays because, my kids are getting older and they're going to be moving out, and I'd like to spend more time with them and take them on some nice trips. If I could get the corner office with a window, you'll be shocked at what the ask is. And I know this because I come from restaurants. And here's a little secret about restaurants. if a restaurant ever screws up your meal and the manager comes to you and says, how can I make it right? This is psychological because the manager is willing to do on average twice what the customer expects. So I will give you I worked in a fine dining environment and we screwed someone up, screwed up their meal, and they were really unhappy. And I went to them and said, I was ready to buy the $500 meal, like with wine and everything. And I said to them, what can I do to make it right? And he said, if you take care of our wine, that would be great. And I said, no problem. And I'm going to buy you dessert. And they're like, oh, that's amazing. Thank you. It cost me $80 when it could have cost me $500. And they were elated because I went over and above what they expected, right? But these are the simple things that we miss sometimes, just kind of talking to our folks, even when there's nothing wrong, just doing that point easy, saying, everything's going, temperature check here, everything all right? Have you noticed anything? How are you feeling? It's important. Communication is important.
Communication,
Funny,
right?
Isn't it weird?
I know, crazy. Yeah. Well, and it doesn't get any easier, as we said, but it's a similar dynamic for travel. When there's flight disruptions, people have the experience of feeling like nobody's communicating anything with me. I'm so frustrated. What's going on? That's the worst customer experience, right? But even if the same exact problem is happening, that's technically the disruption, and they communicate with you along the way, even if they don't have a whole lot of information to share, that they're in relationship with you and taking responsibility for that, it's a far better customer experience, right? And I think that still translates 100%. Into the employee environment too, that as long as we're connected, we can take care of it. We can address so much more if we're in connected and open conversation on a regular basis. But that means you can't take it for granted. If I had to, you said it earlier about going into conversations with curiosity. I think two really important leadership traits are curiosity and appreciation. So curiosity, even when I'm confounded by an employee's behavior, like what are they thinking? Can I catch myself and go into that curious to understand the logic behind how they're operating? Because it makes sense to them from their perspective. I guarantee it. So what can I learn from what they're seeing or what they're experiencing? Curiosity. And then appreciation, we blow by way too much of the time, which means there's a lot that's going right that we're not going and verbally saying, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. And it has X impact, such that we're then actually making sure that can happen again, because they're much more likely to continue doing that thing if we're noticing it, because people don't want to be invisible. High performers definitely don't want to be invisible. They want to be acknowledged, right? So that's really important. And we talk about vitality. So it's similar to how people talk about engagement, but we think that if people are experiencing vitality collectively, then your organization will also experience vitality in terms of its performance. So there's 3 different components to that are really foundational to just human interaction and their well-being. But one is community. So do I feel like I belong here? I have a place here and I am appreciated. I'm wanted I'm wanted here. The second is contribution. Is there a meaningful and unique contribution that I have to give that I'm valued for? So that's where appreciation comes into play. Even if I'm giving that thing and it is valued, if nobody tells me, then I don't have a sense of feeling valued, right? Yep. So community, contribution, and then choice. So do I feel like I have agency in my contributing that thing? Is it my choice versus I'm just complying with whatever my leader wants me to do?
Yep.
So those 3 things together add up to an experience of vitality. And if we just designed our leadership around that, I think that people would be experiencing far different outcomes with their teams, whether that's on a daily basis or long-term in terms of results and performance. So it's a lot to consider, but that's why we think communication is so critical to focus on, because it's what builds relationships. And if you think about the percentage of the time you spend in conversation in order to get your work done, whether that's live or asynchronous, so email, Teams, any kind of chat environment, that's a lot of interpersonal stuff going on. And so if we just focused on that as a basic unit for us to really get great at, it could really change a lot in terms of our organization and our experience within it.
Very cool. You just put a bow on everything. That was perfect. That's the perfect ending.
Wonderful.
Thank you. That was amazing. So we buried the lead here in the beginning. We talked about the Emerging Leaders Program. You even talked about you mentioned something around price. So if I'm a business owner out there and I'm thinking, I got a couple middle management people I think could benefit from it, and I can vouch for it. It's an amazing program. How can we learn about it? And then maybe you could let us know kind of some rough costing around what I would expect to pay for it.
Yeah, so we have a couple of different formats for that program. So one of them is all virtual. So it takes place over the course of roughly 5 to 6 weeks. And it's a cohort. So you have different leaders from different organizations that are coming together to go through the experience. There's a mix of group coaching and content, and then some asynchronous learning as well. So like reading a chapter out of a book or watching a video or something like that. And we think that multiple modalities are really important for somebody to have an effective learning experience. And then there's a capstone at the end of that so that they get to share back what they learned and what impact it made on their real life challenges at work. So that's the virtual experience. That one's I believe it's $3,500 right now. And then you have the option to add on 3 one-on-one coaching sessions to follow. So if you want to try and reinforce whatever they learned and make it super contextual to whatever they're in, then we can offer coaching for them. And then we also have an in-person program that we have 2 different cities this year. We'll be in Houston in the fall and then Portland in December. And that is a 1-day intensive. And then they'll have 3 one-on-one coaching sessions after that and a virtual connect with their cohort to just check in on how you doing? How's this going when you go back home and apply it to the real world? So
Amazing.
It depends on what kind of formats they like, but that in-person one is at $5,000 and that includes the 3 one-on-one coaching sessions. So
beautiful. And we can learn more about that at, Matt, do you have the URL handy? There it is.
Yes. There you go. So that's our landing page for all the information about Emerging Leader. You can reach out to Conversant through the contact form on that page, and we'll be happy to answer questions. We also are happy to put you in touch with past participants in case you want to see what their experience is.
Reference check you.
Yes, exactly. Make sure we're telling the truth here.
And we're going to drop that link into the show notes as well. And then how else can we get in touch with you if we want to learn more about Conversant or just more connect with you?
You can find anything about Conversant at conversant.com. So look into all the different kinds of work that we do. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Emerose Connolly. And then you can also connect with Conversant on LinkedIn. We post a lot of different things that are supportive around leadership development, little reminders on a daily basis, and then updates from us on what we're offering. And then we also have our podcast on Connection that I host, and we talk about all the different challenges around life at work. So a lot of leadership and collaboration topics. So check us out there and we'd be happy to have you.
Yeah, it's an amazing podcast. They were desperate for a guest and had me on there. So I'm coming out in June. But it was really well done. I was super impressed. Well, hey, thank you so much. This has been great. The information's been amazing. Tons of value. Thank you so much, Emerose.
Thank you, Corey. It was great to have a conversation with you, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
I know we'll talk soon. Thank you. All right. So many interesting connections. So when we did the round table, I believe I said, as the more I hear people talk about communication, the more I think curiosity is the most important thing. To which Dr. Bob quickly corrected me and said, curiosity, but you have to make a decision. You have to take action. You can't just be curious all day. But curious feels like it's the first step. You have to be curious to start these conversations. And then Emerose also mentioned about that middle management being so key to your success. And going back to Ryan Estes' episode, the quote that sticks in my brain from him is, your company can't grow until your people do. So you talk to these smart people who understand how to develop management, how to develop leaders, and there are consistencies in here. Be curious, develop your people, be strong at communicating, deal with issues early, don't kick the can. There's just so many of them. So I hope you got some great value out of Emerose today. It was so good, and I was so happy to have her come on and be part of the conversation. As always, we self produce this show, and we always appreciate anyone's help to help us promote. So if you could just subscribe, do us a favor and subscribe, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you are. Help us jump into that algorithm, get recommended to more people so we can get some traction and help some more business owners. We would appreciate it. That's all I have for you today. I'm Corey Harlock. I've been your host. And until next time, stop grinding, start growing.